to you about a recent film, which I think is quite good, surprisingly good. And there are certainly very good performances by 3 or 4 people in it. The title of the film is Man on Fire. Denzel Washington, who has twice won the Academy Award. Some people would say because he's black, but and I've seen him before, and he's certainly good. But in this movie, I think he's more than good. I think he's really good. And I think the story is better than it appears to be at first also. He's supported by another great actor, one of our best, Christopher Walken, who would never be in some shabby film. Third, the little girl, Dakota somebody, who starred in I Am Sam, which everybody loves. Heartwarming little blonde girl. And Michael Anthony, who is a Latino, and he's very good in this too. Also, I know what I'll talk to you about. This is an idea of one of my students, actually, not my own. The movie is comparable to a movie that has been very successful in Korea and other places too. Leon. Leon, a story about a kind of a killer, cold-hearted killer who's kind of in despair, and whose heart is touched by his relationship with a little girl. Same thing, Man on Fire. But the contrast is very revealing, and it reveals that Man on Fire is a far better film, and I'll explain why. Okay. Denzel Washington has worked for the CIA for 15 years. Covert operations, undercover stuff. And he's, as we say, burnt out. Too much killing, too much violence. He has killed a lot. He's an arms expert. He's a combat expert. He is, as Christopher Walken later says, he's an artist of death. He knows how to kill. Anyway, so he's kind of in despair. His life has lost all meaning, and he drinks heavily. Every night he drinks heavily. He goes to at the very beginning of the film, we get some footage that is very well done. The cinematography, I think, is tremendous. The sequence of Confused, a kidnapping that takes place right in the heart of Mexico City. 500 people see it. Nothing. And then we get the caption. Once every 60 seconds, I think, or 60 minutes, someone is kidnapped in Latin America. The entire film takes place in Mexico City, really. Okay. And we just saw one of these kidnappings, and it turns out it's a ring, a very sophisticated ring of kidnappers. The police are in on it, all kinds of things. But this is treated seriously. Denzel plays a character named John Creasy. And at the end of the film, we learn that John Creasy was a real man. And that something resembling the truth of this story apparently really happened, which heightens the interest tremendously. Okay, so Denzel Creasy goes to visit Christopher Walken. Rayburn is his name, who has retired and is sick of killing and is trying to enjoy life a little bit, and he's a charming man. And he's a good friend to Creasy. Tries to give him some hope, but Creasy is just in a downward spiral. Rayburn persuades him to try to get a position as a bodyguard, because the rich, the wealthy in Mexico City, especially where there's a lot of money, need bodyguards in order to purchase life insurance or kidnapping insurance from insurance companies. The companies will only insure one if one has a competent bodyguard. So we meet the family of Sammy is his name. He's Mexican, speaks perfect English. His wife is American, a very pretty blonde American woman. And they have a child, Pita, Lupita. Pita is her name, blonde. Now about 8 years old, 9 years old. Very charming. Okay, so Creasy applies for the job, is interviewed, confesses that he drinks, but Sammy's not so concerned about that. Does it affect your performance? A little bit. Coordination, quickness of reaction, but unless the kidnappers are very well-trained professionals, Creasy thinks he can handle the situation. So he's hired. He enters the bosom of the family, has his own room, kind of a back room, servant room kind of thing. The little girl, Pita, is kind of fascinated by him and wants to befriend him. Sees that he's sad, but Creasy kind of resists. Look, I'm being paid to be your bodyguard, not your friend. Maybe I should quit this job and you hire someone who's more sociable. He resists. He resists hope, really. So he drives the little girl to and from school. Mercedes, of course. Tense, crowded city. Lots of things happen. He's kind of jumpy, very quick to draw his gun. And we sense more and more that someone is following them. Now, early in the film, before Creasy was even hired, we get a conversation between Sammy, Dad, and his lawyer, who persuades him to hire a bodyguard so that he can have kidnapping insurance. Traditionally, almost, what should we say, conventionally, the kidnappers demand $10 million. They kidnap your son, your daughter, your wife, $10 million. The insurance company knows this, and that's the game. Okay. So we meet that lawyer. Okay. Now, more and more as the days pass, Creasy starts to resist little Pita less and less, but he notices, as he's quick to notice, when they're being followed, and there are a couple of close situations in which he stops suddenly. The car that's right behind him has to swerve and pass and keep going. He noted most of a license number, and interestingly, little Pita noticed it too and wrote it down in her little notebook. She's a sharp little girl, but mostly she admires and, in a sense, wants to help Creasy. Then we discover the real turning point in their relationship, which is that Pita is a swimmer. She's a pretty good swimmer. They have their own little pool in the front yard, right in the middle of the city. But she never wins. Always finishes second, third. And Creasy seems to know something about this. And he becomes kind of her coach. He says, now, what do you think? You're the fastest swimmer of all of these people, but you never win. You finish second or third. Why? Bad start. Why is that? Afraid of that gun when it goes off. Well, maybe the best scenes in the whole film show the sequence of him training her, first, not to fear that gun, but to regard that gun as a liberator. When you hear that gun go off, you're not afraid. That gun liberates you to dive into the water and swim to victory. A whole mental change. And he changes as a result of it too. They become great friends. She wins a race. A pretty great moment. It really is a very moving film. Though not sentimental, I would say. A wonderful moment comes after she wins a race and she rushes and jumps into his arms. And I would say the best scene in the whole film shows, we see, she's on this side. A little girl in her bathing suit. We see her face smiling, happy. Then the camera wheels around. Joy on his face. It's the best scene in the film. I don't know how the director did that. Or Denzel. Anyway, he stops drinking. He's changed. She gives him a present, a St. Jude medal. They're Catholics, of course. She goes to a Catholic school. a St. Jude medal. A St. Jude medal Catholics wear for protection against harm. He cherishes it. Earlier, left something out, but that's okay, we have time. Earlier, when he was having one of his particularly dark nights, when he was in despair, drinking, but drinking couldn't help him. Sense of absolute nihilistic moments, sense of the meaninglessness of his life at least. Didn't want to live anymore. He always has a gun, of course, he's always practicing and all that. And we watch him put in a bullet. No. Click. What? This never happens. Takes the bullet out, looks at it. It's a defective bullet. Well, what are the odds of this happening? 1 in a million? A billion? It doesn't happen. Not often. That night changes his life. First of all, in fact, really the sequence is that event, the failed, miscarried suicide attempt, is the one that opens him up in the first place. By the way, he's a serious Bible reader, reads the Bible all the time, even in Spanish, and he speaks Spanish. Denzel, good for Denzel. But it helps some, he says. Anyway, but it didn't help that night. He tried to commit suicide, and it didn't go off. He kept that bullet. And it's really beginning the next day that they discover swimming, he and little Pita. That relationship blossoms. It's really well done. That relationship is really well done. Okay. But we know that harm is coming. And in Pita takes piano, has been taking piano for some years maybe, but she hates it. She doesn't like it. And one day she goes to her father who was in the living room, big house, palatial house, practicing hitting golf balls. Dad, please don't make me go to piano anymore. You have to go. And then he's really a good father, but you have to go. The first time one sees the film, one doesn't realize why that's important. It's only afterwards that one does. And there are several things like that. And I think that's a mark of a good film too. And this is well put together, well thought out. And it has this social aspect too, as you'll see. Okay. So, we don't quite realize why, but blah, blah, blah. It's while the parents are away on a trip, business, that the relationship between Pita and Creasy blossoms. And it could only have blossomed under those circumstances. When they come back, Mom is pleasantly surprised to find how close they are. Mom goes looking for Pita. Pita is in Creasy's room. Creasy helps her with her homework. She asks Creasy questions about history, some charming things like, what's a concubine? Mom slips into the room just as that question was being asked, and Creasy deals with it very parentally, gently, tactfully. And Mom is big enough not to be jealous of Creasy. She really loves her daughter. And she's a good person. A little superficial at this point, but loves her daughter tremendously. Okay, back to our story. What happens next is almost inevitable. Creasy drives Pita to her piano lesson, which takes place in some charming little square residential, Mexico City, trees, a little park, a little bit, benches and all that. Pita goes in. Creasy waits outside for her. He notices some strange cars coming around, and he notices a police car with 2 policemen in it, and they get out and kind of stand around. He's a little puzzled by this, and he's a very sharp man, but who would suspect? Then, when Pita comes out of that door across the street, he realizes what's happening. These are kidnappers, and suddenly the cop is shooting at him, and he realizes those 2 cops are corrupt cops who are in on the kidnapping too. Creasy does his thing. He kills 4 of them, but he's shot 2 or 3 times directly in the chest. He's down. He's not out yet. Pita, run. Pita runs. but she's so devoted to him. It really is very powerful. She's very believably, she's screaming "Creasy, Creasy" as she runs away, and then she stops and she runs back. She can't stand it, and she runs to try to help him or do what he can. His eyes are still open, though he's down and strengthless. She's over him, "Creasy, Creasy, Creasy," screaming, and the last thing, no, suddenly one of the kidnappers, because there must have been about 6 or 8 of them maybe, grabs her, throws her into the car. He sees this, even sees the car as it goes away, lying down, and then he's unconscious. Next thing we know, he's in the hospital. The police are making what should we say, pompous statements about how we've got him, we got Creasy. He's a cop killer because he killed 2 cops. But a couple of very sharp reporters questioning the police chief point out that those 2 cops were notoriously corrupt, and they were off duty at the time. What were they doing there in uniform? Obviously, to everyone, they were part of the kidnapping scheme. And so we realize the police are deeply involved in all of this. Now, she has been kidnapped. An army of detectives and technology installs itself in the family house because there will be the phone calls, the demands for ransom, the negotiation, and all that. And then Sammy, the father, promises to bring $10 million in 2 garbage sacks, $5 million, in a car, leave the car parked somewhere, go away. Have no shirt on, so he can't conceal any weapon or conceal anything. These guys have done this many times, and they do it well. Meanwhile, Creasy is alive, but just barely. His friend Rayburn, Christopher Walken, has returned to help him if he can. And he is a wily, sharp guy. He knows that Creasy's life is in danger as long as he's in that hospital because probably the police will try to kill him. So he doesn't talk about what he saw. He is able to get him out. They put him in a dog pound. Very interesting. But I guess it is safe from the police. A lot of things are assumed here. Okay. And very slowly, Creasy starts to recover. But the payoff event happened, the 2 bags, the $10 million. But at the payoff event, suddenly the police appeared. They shot and killed 2 of the people who were picking up the money. And the people got away, though, with the money. But they didn't. Actually, I'm not quite sure of that, so there's confusion there. The point really is that Rayburn has to tell Creasy, who is still in very serious condition, that Pita is apparently dead. Why? Because the payoff was not made. Then the phone call, oh, what happened to the money? What happened to the money? It's assumed that the police got it. Corrupt police got the money. But the result of this is apparently that the kidnappers will kill little Pita. So when Rayburn tells Creasy this, it's at that moment that he becomes a man on fire. On fire of what? The meaning of his life really has just been snatched from him, and his only purpose in life is revenge. He will find and kill, as he says, everyone who profited from this, everyone who was involved in this in any way. He will find them and kill them. Before he's able to walk and all that, he starts on the path. Now he's helped by a Mexican woman reporter who's very brave and wants to get to the bottom of things. And she has a lover, a detective who's kind of brave too, kind of comical too. But they will give him some information because he needs information. She approaches Creasy and says, I can help you, you help me. Creasy is skeptical at first, but then he realizes, yes, he does need her help, because he'll need addresses, phone numbers, locations, connections, bank accounts, all that. All of this happens. Now, the first information he gets is that license plate minus the final number. So he gives the woman, the reporter, the license, but there are 10 possibilities for that last number, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Have to get a hold of all 10 of them and figure out who this must be. But they do that, and they figure out who it is. So Creasy goes after this guy. He was one of the men who actually performed the kidnapping. And he recognizes him. He saw him. So, I don't remember how, but it doesn't matter. It happens very fast. Creasy gets him, puts him into a car, and goes driving off. Clearly, he's been kind of torturing the guy. He's no shirt. Some slashes here, some blood here. And the car is parked kind of near the edge of a cliff. 100 meters, maybe less. 80 meters, maybe. And the man's hands are taped heavily to the steering wheel of his car, but the fingers are exposed. And Creasy, we now see what is meant by a man on fire. Creasy wants information from this guy. Who ordered this? Who's the boss? Who is responsible for the kidnappings? I need names. Of course, the guy resists. Everyone tries to intimidate Creasy by saying that all of the people connected with this are members of an organization called La Hermanidad, the Brotherhood. And these are tough guys. It's like mafia tough. And they're everywhere. Creasy's not afraid. He's the man on fire. But he doesn't have much reason to be afraid either, frankly. Anyway, so, but Creasy's got a knife. And Creasy says, you tell me what happens, or I will cut off your fingers. And he cuts off one finger. The man is screaming. But Creasy also has some kind of thing to stop the bleeding, so he doesn't bleed to death. So he cuts off a finger, stops the bleeding. Cuts off another. I think he cuts off 3. But he gets key information. He gets the guardians. The guardians are the people to whom the kidnapped little children are taken first. They keep them. These people are centered at a club called Rave. And Rave is a kind of American thing where people go in large numbers, hear very loud music. They don't even dance. They just scream and jump up and down on drugs, ecstasy especially, apparently. So the noise in the place is tremendous. Creasy goes in there. He's always got his guns, his collection of guns. He knows one guy to go after, the butcher, who's a big, tough guy, kind of a door guardman. He puts a gun in his ribs and says, take me upstairs. He takes him upstairs, gets in the secret door, knock, 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 pushes the door open, smashing the guy's face. 2 men, the butcher, another man, and a woman are in there. Creasy starts by just coolly killing the butcher. Then he gets information about how things work, how these kidnappings work, from this other guy, whom he kills, of course. And he gets an ATM card and the PIN number. That's how these people were paid. So if he can find out whose PIN number, if he can get at the account of this PIN number, he can find out who is putting the $200 a week into it, because that's how they got paid. He gets that information. Before he leaves the Rave, he blows the place up. That is, he gets into the technology area, plants bombs. He's got his sawed-off shotgun already, and he has rescued a girl who was kidnapped yesterday, the previous day. So he's getting close to the heart of things. Turns the girl over to the reporter. He has saved her life and the family a lot. Now he knows that the money is paid by a high-ranking police official named Fuentes. Fuentes always travels with a motorcade. It's like a small army. Going to be hard to get to him. But Creasy has rockets, kind of World War II rockets. He breaks into the house of an elderly couple, kind of charming, Mexicans of course, upstairs on the first floor, overlooking the square where the car will come out, and we watch him as the car comes out. Rocket, boom, that car explodes. The car behind it is Fuentes' car, driven by somebody. Creasy goes out there with a gun, shooting bad guys, but not Fuentes. He captures Fuentes and drives off in Fuentes' car. Next thing we see, Fuentes, blindfolded, is standing under an overpass, a network of overpasses. Why? So that the police with their helicopters can't detect, can't see, detect anything, radio sites, anything. This Fuentes, an obese, unattractive person, has been stripped down to just his underwear and socks, and he's taped, his hands are taped to the hood of a car, his car. His feet are taped so he can't move, there's nothing he can do, and he's blindfolded. Creasy then unblindfolds him brutally, and explains to him that he, Creasy, has put an explosive in a suppository. This is how sometimes terrorists and thieves sneak drugs or money or special things into the country. They put the thing in this, larger usually, and then stick it up their rectum into their insides. That's how they do it. Creasy has put an explosive with a timing device up the rectum of this high police official, who, after all, is the man, it turns out, I didn't say this clearly, he is the man who collected the money, the 10 million that was left, and so he was responsible for the death of Pita, as far as Creasy knows. Why? Because he intercepted the money so that the kidnappers did not get the money, that's right. But he confesses to Creasy the key fact that there were not 10 million in there. There were 2.5 million. Where are the other 7.5 million? And now Creasy knows he's getting closer. What he learns, I've got to summarize quickly a little bit. What he learns is that the lawyer, Sammy's lawyer, instead of putting 10 million into the car that night, put only 2.5 million. What happened to 5 million? What happened to the other 2.5? It turns out that the lawyer kept 2.5 million, and Sammy, the father, arranged all this to get 5 million. Why? Because he needed the money desperately. His father had many debts, was a gambler, many problems. So basically he risked the life of his own daughter, but he was quite sure that it would all work out fine. Instead, it didn't work out fine. Creasy has this information, reveals it to the wife, who is uncontrollably angry at her husband. Husband commits suicide in a powerful scene. The poor man. He did it for money. He did it for his family. That's what he thought. But it went badly, and she can't forgive him for that. Now he has to chase after whoever it is the real source of all these kidnappings, and he's called the Voice. He finally finds the Voice through violence by finding the Voice's wife and brother. In the process, though, he is wounded in a gunshot wound. It's not fatal, but it will be the end of him. He makes contact with the Voice, and they make a deal. It turns out that Pita is not dead. As the Voice says, I'm a businessman. She's not worth anything to me dead. So he has kept her. She's alive. The little girl who gives his life meaning is still alive. They make a deal. Creasy will give up the brother and himself to the voice. The voice will give up Pita to return to her mother. At the very end, this is what happens. It's quite moving, and it is believable. The second time more believable than first time. Creasy's dying, though, because he's been bleeding for hours as a result of his wound. And he collapses a few times. He gets into the car of the bad guys. They're driving away. And slowly he sinks, and we know he's dead. So basically he knew that he was a dying man. I think he was perfectly ready to die. He had rescued her, but there was no future for him. He couldn't get medical attention probably anyway. And I think he was just tired of living, but happy that he had been able to rescue the little girl. Very powerful. Good movie. Especially the connections, the lawyer, the insurance ring is in on everything. The complexity of evil. I mentioned Leon before. In Leon, evil is simple. It's one very crazy, disturbed cop. Too simple. Just one bad guy. In Men of Fire, Man on Fire, evil is a very pervasive, subtle, full of gradations, full of justifications, full of human cowardice and human fear and human greed. Not simple. Much more convincing, much more powerful analysis. Thank you.